In this video, we examine a group that steals from cannabis farms. During one theft operation in Bristol targeting crops owned by the Albanian Mafia, everything went terribly wrong. The team got ambushed. The Mafia captured one crew member, while another escaped. The remaining two members came back to save their friend and brother. What followed was a brutal 2-against-6 confrontation that resulted in a killing. We will explore the complete case, including the police work and the courtroom proceedings. On the 24th of May 2022, 4 men, Brickell Pelage, Nicola Pelage, Radian Laika, and Castra Maj, belonged to an Albanian group. They travelled to Bristol with plans to steal a cannabis crop. The target crop was growing inside a property on Bloomfield Road in the Brislington area. This rented property on Bloomfield Road was being operated by a different Albanian group, with connections to organised crime families. For roughly 12 months, Brickell and Laika had been taking crops from different cultivation sites. Their operations typically relied on insider tips or information they picked up through conversations in London's Albanian networks. The business proved profitable, though Brickell and Laika wanted to avoid violent confrontations. They knew how to defend themselves if needed, but using violence would be foolish. Any violent incident would make them marked targets. Their safety would be at risk everywhere, whether in England, back home in Albania, or anywhere across Europe. What made them successful? They had a tight group of trusted people. They kept their robbery operations secret. They also had a buyer who operated far away from Albanian community circles. Their method was straightforward. They would watch properties carefully, spending hours just sitting and waiting. When a property appeared empty and the crop looked ready for harvesting, the gang would enter and take everything. Several weeks before the Bloomfield Road incident in Bristol, Brickell, Laika and their crew attempted stealing from a house in Manchester. After watching the location for multiple days, they gave up because people were constantly present at that property. Months earlier, Brickell had successfully stolen a crop from this same Bloomfield Road house using inside information. He had gone drinking with someone from the criminal group involved in growing that crop. After failing in Manchester, Brickell decided to try his luck in Bristol once more. The target remained the same, the identical house on Bloomfield Road they had robbed months before. Someone from the growers' organisation had tipped them off that the property would be unoccupied. Brickell organised the operation and arranged for gang members to help with the theft. The gang brought their robbery equipment stored in a van. This included sharp tools like long knives, face masks, and sheets for removing the harvested plants. A gang connected to the Albanian Mafia was running this operation. In the days leading up to when the crop would be ready, orders came down from higher levels in the organisation to the gang leaders on the ground. There could not be any mistakes this time. The Mafia had suffered losses from thefts at other growing locations. It seemed obvious that someone inside was leaking information. The Mafia members were extremely suspicious. Since the Bloomfield Road crop had been robbed earlier, they strongly believed another theft might happen. So the gang arrived with numbers, 6 people total, and they positioned themselves in and around the house area on the afternoon and evening of May 24th, 2022. The Mafia's crop was worth £100,000. Over the next few days, they planned to harvest it and establish another growing operation. Aranet Laika worked for the Mafia gang. Looking out from the house's bedroom window on Bloomfield Road, he noticed a van in the parking area. The writing on the van told him these people were from his home country of Albania, but he did not recognise any of them. This put everyone in the grow house on high alert, and their concern was justified. It was Brickell and Laika's crew waiting in position. Brickell and Laika put their robbery plan into action. Their crew members, Nicola and Maj, arrived on the road in their van. Things immediately went wrong. When Nicola and Maj were confronted by the Mafia gang, several men, including Aranet, approached them. After being caught, Nicola and Mage found their van blocked by the Mafia's BMW X5. Shortly after the confrontation with the gang began, Mage ran away from the scene. The gang made threats and used violence against Nicola. Aranette and others attacked him. The violence included weapons. At least one screwdriver was used during the assault. At this moment, Nicola stood alone, heavily outnumbered by the Mafia gang members. The growers had a purpose for inflicting this violence on Nicola. They wanted information about who the informant was in their organization, the person giving away details about the grow operation. Neighbors heard shouting through the walls. The CCTV footage showed that Mafia gang members were watching for other crew members from the robbery team who might arrive to help with the theft. More people from the robbery gang did show up. It was Brickell and Leica. They arrived shortly after the van had been blocked by the growers at the end of the road. Earlier, Nicola had called his brother Brickell on his cell phone, telling him he had been stopped. When Brickell and Leica arrived at the end of Bloomfield Road, they paused and observed the scene. They saw the van blocked in by the growers. They concluded that Nicola was being held by people who were indeed from the Albanian Mafia. This realization prompted Brickell and Leica to leave the area. They needed weapons. They had not brought any with them, but their friend and brother Nicola was in the hands of the Mafia. The Mafia would most likely torture him and possibly kill him. Brickell and Leica went to get weapons of some kind to rescue Nicola. They drove to a nearby Sainsbury's store. There they purchased 4 large kitchen knives. Leica felt frightened about the situation they were in. He was very unwilling to return to Bloomfield Road, but he felt he had no choice but to help his friend Brickell. Brickell said he would not abandon Nicola. He would not leave his brother behind. The robbery is finished. We get my brother and we leave. Before departing from Sainsbury's, Brickell and Leica went to the store bathrooms to remove the packaging from the knives. They each hid 2 knives inside their clothing. Armed now, they returned to their car and headed back toward Bloomfield Road. Upon arriving at the turning circle at the bottom of the road, Brickell quickly jumped out of the car, holding up the 2 knives. He chased people from the Mafia gang. As Leica pulled up in the car, she also took 2 knives and entered the turning circle area. A major fight broke out between numerous people from both gangs. Brickell and Leica were outnumbered 6-2, but they did not back down. With knives in each hand, they charged into the Mafia gang, who were also armed with knives. What happened next was extreme violence from all directions. People living around the turning circle heard horrifying shouts and screams. Nicola, who had been injured and captured, broke free and jumped into the fight. During this fighting, Brickell and Leica stabbed and slashed Aranette from the Mafia gang. He suffered numerous knife wounds, though nobody can say for certain who inflicted any specific injury. Aranette's arm was cut badly, severing 2 of his arteries. Both Brickell and Leica were swinging knives. Although Nicola was actively participating in the fighting, things started turning against the robbery gang. During the conflict, both Nicola and Leica suffered serious injuries. The Mafia gang caused major life-threatening wounds using various different weapons. Brickell also received injuries, but they were less serious in nature. Realizing that his 2 friends were badly hurt, Brickell took his brother to the car. He then went back into the fight to get Leica. All the Mafia gang members were badly injured as well. Brickell drove Leica and Nicola to get medical help. Aranette also left the scene with his group, but died soon after on a nearby road, despite an ambulance arriving quickly. Aranette was abandoned on the roadside by his fellow gang members, who then fled the country. Aranette bled to death at the roadside. Police arrived 10 minutes after the fighting ended. They were greeted by a horrific scene. Everyone had fled, but the amount of blood on the ground told part of the story. Neighbors had witnessed the entire incident. 2 men fighting a gang, pushing their way toward the house, then trying to retreat to a car. When a third man joined the two, all three fought the others. Then two of them hit the ground. The one man still fighting took on four men at once and knocked down two of them. The other two retreated, which gave the man time to drag his wounded friends to a car and drive away. Inside the house, the gang had a large crop ready to harvest. Bags were prepared to take it away. The gang member who had been stabbed and killed was identified. The hunt was on for the gang who started the attack, and the gang responsible for the grow operation. Later, two men walked into an emergency room. The emergency room then notified the police. Over the following days, Brikel Pelage, Nicola Pelage, Radian Laika, and Castra Mage were all arrested and charged with murder. They were remanded into custody. The five men from the grow house had fled the country into Europe.
We moved to Bristol Crown Court on the 21st of April 2023, with the Honourable Mr Justice Saini presiding. Radian Laika and Brikel Pelage denied the murder charge, but were found guilty by a jury at Bristol Crown Court. Of the other two defendants, one was found guilty of manslaughter and the other of violent disorder. Here are the judge's words and the sentences handed down. Brikel Pelage, you were 32 years old when the murder occurred. I consider that you admitted to earlier involvement in stealing Class B products, which is a relatively minor matter in the overall context. Regarding mitigating factors, there are several powerful points in your favour. First, I accept that you had no intention to kill Aranette. Second, I have proceeded on the basis that this was a context of excessive force in self-defence or defence of others, which led to unintended escalation. Third, although this cannot properly be called a case of provocation, I accept the point that the actions of the gang had features of an ambush. Fourth, the killing was not premeditated. Fifth, you have no previous convictions, and having seen you give evidence, I am satisfied that aside from the present incident, you are not a violent man. The sixth reason is that I take into account your remorse. I sentence you to life imprisonment. The minimum term you will serve is 20 years. It is important to emphasise so that you and the public understand the position the minimum term is exactly that, a minimum period which cannot be reduced. After you have served 20 years, there is no guarantee you will be released at that time, or at any particular time thereafter. If, after the 20-year period, the parole board decides you are fit to be released, you will be released. Moreover, if and when you are released, you will remain subject to licence for the rest of your life, and may therefore be recalled to continue your life sentence if you reoffend or otherwise breach the conditions of your licence. It is in these ways that a life sentence protects the public for the future. Radian Laika, you were 35 years old when the murder took place. I do not consider there to be any statutory or non-statutory aggravating factors beyond your earlier convictions. Those are not for offences of violence. I was told you were convicted in 2013 of 2 offences, false imprisonment and blackmail at Snaresbrook Crown Court. You received sentences of 9 and 7 years respectively to be served concurrently. I take into account that these convictions are rather old. You also admitted earlier involvement in grow thefts, which I consider to be immaterial to the overall context. As mitigating factors, there are several powerful matters in your favour. First, I accept that you had no intention to kill Aranette. Second, you had real reluctance to return to Bloomfield Road a second time, but felt compelled to assist Brikel. Third, I proceed on the basis that this was a context of excessive force in self-defence or defence of others in a situation of unintended escalation of violence. Brikel took the lead role in determining that you would return to Bloomfield Road with weapons, but you were an active participant in the fighting.
I do not consider it appropriate on the overall facts to distinguish between you and Brikel. Having regard to all the factors to which I have made reference, I have concluded that the appropriate minimum term in your case is one of 20 years. I sentence you to life imprisonment. The minimum term you will serve is 20 years. It is important to emphasize, so that you and the public can understand the position, the minimum term is just that, a minimum period which cannot be reduced. After you have served your 20 years, there is no guarantee you will be released. Nicola Pelage, you were 28 years old at the time of the offence. As I have already said, I am satisfied that you were a victim of violence at the hands of the Gro gang, including Aranet the deceased, before the main fighting began upon the return of Brickell and Leica. Before they arrived, you were substantially outnumbered and assaulted. Mage fled the scene, and you were left alone to face 3 to 4 members of the gang. The more serious violence, however, began when Brickell and Leica returned in the Picasso, armed with the 4 knives. On the jury's verdict, they rejected your self-defense or defense of others pleas. They were sure you assisted and encouraged the fighting, which led to Aranet's death, and that you intended at least some harm short of very serious harm. I bear in mind the incident was over in about a minute, and there were extreme, life-threatening acts of violence against you by members of the Gro gang. You suffered very serious injuries. As in the case of your co-defendants, I proceed on the basis that in your case there are elements of excessive force in self-defense or defense of others in your conduct, at least until the late stages of the fighting. Considering all circumstances in my judgment of aggravation and mitigation, I impose a sentence of imprisonment of 5 years. You will receive credit for the 324 days you have served in custody. You will be released from custody 2/3 of the way through your 5-year sentence, and the remainder of your sentence will be served under license in the community. Mr. Mage, at the time of the violent disorder to which you have entered a guilty plea, your age was 34 years old. I have already stated the facts of your limited involvement in the events that day and what you did. I accept the basic facts and the basis of the plea. You did not engage in violence personally. Rather, you were part of the group threatening unlawful violence in such a way that a bystander of reasonable firmness present would have feared for his own safety. Such was the increasing level of violence and threat. You ran from the scene to the local petrol station. You did not rejoin the others in your crew and were not present in the violence in which Aranet suffered these fatal injuries. As to the seriousness of the incident, it is significant that it took place in a public area and disturbed a number of people in their own homes. However, the real fear was caused by the events that unfolded after you ran away, which I have already described. This is a case which will require some form of custodial sentence, but with significant movement from the starting point. The sentence I impose is 18 weeks custody. You have served 326 days already, having been in custody since the 25th of May 2022, and accordingly have no further period of imprisonment to serve. You are free to go. Though the murder of Aranet Leica is tragic, if we move away from that part just for a moment, this case makes absolutely fascinating reading. The case remained pretty low level on the news, but it is one I made a note of to get more information and obtain the court documents. I was reading through them before Christmas. Brickell and Leica's crew only robbed cannabis crops, but made the mistake of picking a crop where the Albanian Mafia was waiting for them. When Brickell's brother Nicola was taken, the situation quickly escalated. Though through Brickell's determination with Leica to rescue his brother, he did just that and saved his life, though he did take the life of Aranet Leica. It is amazing that more people did not die. Aranet Leica was just a cog in a big machine that is easily replaceable. The Mafia still keeps going, and more people with fewer opportunities will risk their lives. When you are broke, you do not see the bigger picture. The gangs want you to think you have some control. You do not. Crimes like this should not be happening in the UK. Research by the National Crime Agency has shown that Albanian organised criminal groups control the Class A drug market across all main cities and suburban areas of the UK, with the exception of Merseyside, where local gangsters remain in charge. But the NCA says these gangsters are increasingly specialising now in Class B cannabis, which is seen as very low risk. Albanian crime leaders have been known to send clean skins, people with no criminal records, to the UK in small boats to join organised gangs. However, a dramatic fall in the number of Albanians making the illegal crossing, following an official crackdown, has prompted a recruitment crisis. Advertisements surfaced last year showing gang bosses offering as much as 30% of the profits to workers living on Class B grow farms. Gangs from Albania fueled a tripling in the number of criminals from that country in British prisons. Albanians now make up a third of the largest foreign group jailed in England and Wales, beyond Polish and Romanian criminals, at a cost of around £65,000 each to the taxpayer. 10% of the criminal population is foreign. Plenty of Albanian criminals are not even finishing their sentences. Under the previous government's agreement, they have been flown back to serve their time at home, all at the cost of the taxpayer. But now we have younger people who are crossing the channel on dinghies, claiming to be trafficked, so they cannot be sent back. To many, it is worth the risk. Though Albania is an incredibly beautiful country, it is financially a poor one. The history of communism, corruption, and lack of infrastructure has created major problems. The communist regime also eliminated almost all forms of private property. This ended in 1985, but the lack of investment has created a brain drain where the cleverest people, without any opportunities in their own country, have moved across Europe. The biggest pull has been Germany. As we have seen, the UK does not make anything anymore and is in decline. The UK government, and just to be clear, any of the governments that we have had, has no idea how to get us out of this 18-year stagnation, where real wages ended in 2007. Now the only growth industry is crime, and we have imported the violence and misery it brings.